Well, welcome to our Stewarding the Future conversation. We're excited to be here and excited to just share with you a bit in preparation for our conversations coming up at the beginning of and middle of February. My name is Erin Gilmore. I'm the Transitional Conference Minister for the Rocky Mountain Conference, and I'll let Hunter introduce himself here in just a minute, but we're just excited to share a bit about what the conference has been up to, what we're dreaming about, and how we hope that you can participate with us. And again, look forward to being in conversation. This is just a bit of preparation for us as we think about those conversations. So I'll let Hunter introduce himself and go a little bit about what we're going to go over today.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm Hunter Baker. I'm the conference treasurer, just finishing. This is my second year of first term. I come to the conference brand new with no real conference experience per se. I'm out of the Crested Butte Church, UCC Crested Butte. And I see these conversations as a real opportunity for us to talk about stewardship writ large, stewardship in terms of where the conference is going, should be going, and stewardship in terms of what's feasible financially and how we're doing financially. And most of the time, when I have a stewardship conversation in Crested Butte, it's as simple as, thank you, and here's what we're doing, and how are you? And I really look forward to these conversations being in that sort of mode, if you will. I think that Paul Heinzelman and Nicole LaMarche will probably, our other executive committee members will join as many of these as they can. And I think you may see your association board representative at some of these conversations. You may see a few members of the finance committee. It's really about an opportunity for us to hold it to a relatively small group, but to listen to each other. And what's interesting this year is that the transition context is really upon us, and that opens up opportunities, and it opens up a need for us, all of us, to set a course and direction as we begin to look to a change in leadership. And Aaron, why don't you talk a bit more about where we are in transition, and we'll move on.
Thanks, Hunter. Yeah, so we're in this transitional season in the conference. Began in 2024 and planning to be done by June of 2027. And so as we are about halfway through that transitional period, our focus and attention is really beginning to hone in on a search process for your next conference leadership in whatever configuration that might look like. So these conversations are really the beginning place of wanting to check in with churches and authorized ministers. Through these conversations, much of the information here, in addition to other data, other conversations that the board has been having, all of the information that we can gather into creating a profile that will help just get a snapshot of the conference as we are and where we hope to go and how we hope to continue to be in ministry. That profile writing team will be appointed by the board. And then when that profile is complete, it will be handed off to a search committee. And per the bylaws, the search committee is appointed by the board and with the help of the nominating committee. So the nominating committee is beginning to receive names. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a later slide, but the search committee hopefully will be pulled together by this year's annual meeting, and they can begin launching a full search starting this summer of 2026, and with the hope that a candidate can be presented at the annual celebration in 2027. Anything to add, Hunter?
No, that's great. Thank you.
And I'll just do a little bit here of our overview. All of our churches have a little bit of different relationship and history with knowing about how the conference how their local church fits within a denomination. We have some churches very connected and some churches that just haven't been as connected to the denomination. So we just wanted to give a real big overview of all the settings of the church. So the Rocky Mountain Conference is made up of 70 churches, approximately 8,700 members across Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. In the Rocky Mountain Conference, there are also 5 associations: Platte Valley Association, Metro Denver, Intermountain, Southeastern, and Western. And then we are also connected to the national setting, and we are one of 30 conferences across the whole United Church of Christ. And so each of the settings, the local church, the association, the conference, and the national setting, are all in covenant with one another and provide different resource and different connectional value, but all play an important part in continuing to support the ministry of the church. And then finally, we also have 2 affiliate entities. Many have heard of La Foret, the La Foret Retreat and Conference Center in the Black Forest, where we have our outdoor ministry camps in the summer and throughout the year. And then we also have the endowment fund of the Rocky Mountain Conference that is its own 501c3 as well. Do you want to take the board? Or am I taking the
Well,
board?
it's pretty simple. Our staff is approximately 3 full-time equivalents total. We are 47 volunteers, really trying to do as much of the work as we can, recognizing the limitations of our paid leadership, right, in terms of time. I think you ought to talk a bit about your thoughts on the composition of the board of director and how board of directors, that's a topic I think that comes forward as we
Yeah.
look to leadership. But in a nutshell, it's volunteers and a very small staff. I'm one of the volunteers, by the way, but
Yes.
um,
Yeah, it's been in this time of transition, really looking at how our board of directors is organized, how we're structured, how that supports or doesn't support our mission. That's all part of the conversation that will continue, certainly even beyond this transitional time. But as of now, we're organized both by geography. We have a rep from every association on the board, and we're also have representation of programs. We have several program representatives to different programmatic needs and initiatives in the conference. And then we also have committee reps for a couple of our committees, the Personnel Committee and the Committee on Ministry. And our treasurer is not, is also, I think, not necessarily a representative of finance, but certainly is the head of finance. And then we do appoint a board member to be ex officio on the nominating committee. So just trying to give ourselves a bit of a visual of how the board of directors is organized for ministry. And one of our continued questions about how do we best use our volunteers to forward the mission and ministry of the conference, and in addition to our staff. So that's all part of the conversation that's ongoing. So at the core of this conversation, we continually ask and have been asking for many years. It's an important question for any one of us. Why the church? Why the national setting? Why the association? And we ask, why the conference? As we get clear on that question, we have 3 core ministries that emerge. That these are the things that we feel that the conference can uniquely uphold or strengthen, that is on behalf of the local church ministries, right? So we put the local church at the center of our life together. It's through the local church that ministry happens. And within that local church, there are authorized ministers, both who serve the church, your local church pastors, but within that local church, there are also wider church ministers that have 4-way covenants, people who serve beyond the local church, in chaplains, in hospitals, in jails, in community ministries. But it's still the local church where that relationship is supported and strengthened. And so as we look at what is the role of conference? Developing leaders, supporting leaders from the time there's a call to the time there is one is at the end of their ministry. How do we continue to strengthen, create excellence, build excellence within our leaders, support our leaders? And this is both clergy and lay, as lay leaders are called to help serve their church as moderators, as treasurers, as committee members. What are the resources that we have that can help strengthen leadership across our church? So that's one of our core ministries, is continually looking at it. How do we leverage our resources to help strengthen our leadership? Connected to that is supporting congregations. One of the ways we do that is through leadership, but there are also many other ways in the life cycle of the church that we support congregations. From beginning to end, from a time a church wants to join the church, to join the United Church of Christ or a new ministry, all the way to when it's at the end of its ministry and wanting to leave a legacy beyond its time, beyond history. And then everything in between search and call and transitions and visioning. And sometimes we find ourselves in conflict, all the ways in which we can help support congregations in their life cycles. And then one of the unique roles also of the conference is really being intentional about cultivating covenantal relationships. In many ways, we are the setting that connects to national, connects to association, connects to local church. And so building covenantal relationships is in and of itself such an essential ministry, because it isn't through relationship that so much of our ministry happens, and where God meets us in our relationships with one another. And so we put great emphasis and focus on how do we build relationship? How do we strengthen relationship? How do we build relationship across churches, across associations, and with the wider church beyond the Rocky Mountain Conference? We have several slides here. Oh, wait, before I move forward, glad I popped that up there at the end. I'm continually reminding the board, myself, the staff, that why do we do any of this? Why do we develop leaders? Why do we support congregations? Why do we build relationship? Because the church is here to serve something bigger than ourselves. We are here to equip a courageous church alive with the love of God. In this particular moment in time, in history, in just the life of the church, but certainly just where we are on the planet, where we are in history in the United States, who we are as church matters immensely. Continuing to be a church that centers love at its core, providing a space and an anchor for people to be part of a community where generosity and kindness and courage and love is the values that we express, and continue to help one another grow and develop those skills, those values, that way of being together, that commitment to something larger than ourselves. That is such a needed and important presence in the world, to continue to stand for another way of being, to offer the vision and the invitation to be beloved community together as Jesus extends to us. We can't undersell how important the church is in this moment. And so our collective effort to support the local church in all of its multiplicity is such an essential, I don't want to say what's the right word? It's just such an essential moment for us to be the church in this time. So I can't underestimate how important it is for us to try to help support the church together. That was a long-winded answer, but got to get a little sneak a preach in there. Thanks, Hunter. These next few slides go into all of that, all the specifics. I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but we're going to give you these slides in a PDF form. But these are the many ways in which we are working to develop leaders in specific ways, with members in discernment, with youth, supporting our clergy, supporting people feeling called to ministry that aren't necessarily going to be able to go through a full seminary degree. These are the ways in which we are living in that first circle of developing leaders. These are the many ways in which we support churches, both our member churches and the ones that are seeking to affiliate with us. We provide grants, we provide ministry around anti-racism. There's a group in our conference working on climate justice, in addition to just the regular life cycle of churches, search and call, strategic vision, all of these things. This is one of the areas where we're in lots of conversation. In the developing and growing leaders place, we have hired a part-time bridge ACM to help lead the Committee on Ministry, which is really a heart of the leadership development initiative. For the supporting and growing churches, this is primarily the work of the conference minister. And so one of the central questions that is on our heart and mind, and also would love to have your input on, what are the staff and volunteer structures around how we do this ministry of supporting and growing our churches together that would increase our capacity to accompany churches in all stages of their life together more effectively, more impactfully. So that's one of the things that we're looking at is how do we continue to do this work with necessarily less staff resource. That's one of the opportunities for conversation here when this is still such essential work across the conference. And then finally, in this last section of this last initiative, this core initiative of cultivating covenantal relationships, these are things like our annual celebration. This is, coming together every year and being with one another, building our relationships together, seeing the church at work in a larger setting. We spend a lot of time working with our associations and trying to help support associations live into their own question around who are they called to be in this moment in time. So this is about creating association partnerships. This is about creating congregational partnerships. What are the congregations? How can we share ministry together? Are there creative ways that we could be in ministry together across, not just be in our silos as churches, but work together, do ministry together, share staff together even. So we try to support these kinds of conversations and identify across the conference, we are resourceful, we are leaderful. How do we identify these people? How do we identify these resources and really put them to use in and on behalf of one another? And we also are a really important connection to the national church, especially the MESA team, which is the Ministerial Excellence Support and Authorization team, as well as the Council for Conference Ministers, where we are continuing to ask questions. How do we even work together across conferences? So lots of big questions that are important for us continue as we seek to be the church in this time.
Aaron,
So yeah, please.
Back up on that for a second.
You bet.
When I come out the door, when I come out of our church in Crested Butte, there is hanging on the wall a mortgage dating from the 1880s that was essential, for our church to get started. And I think that this notion of partnerships and shared ministries and collective resources and to me, that's all that is a part of our history. And it's a part, figuring out how to sustain that is what those bullets are about for me.
Thank you. There's things we can do together that we can't do on our own. There's things that when we pool our resources, we can support one another in ways that we wouldn't be able to otherwise. Hunter, do you want to take a stab at this one, or should I feel like I've been talking a lot? I like your perspective.
Well, I'll take a shot at it because
Yeah.
I'm 2 years into this. I came without any of the background that you've just provided, and I've been listening, and I see it now in terms of lifelong support of our leaders, lifelong, if you wanted to call it that, support for our churches as they go through every stage of their ministries, and connections are really paramount. That's where our strength is. That's where the treasure is. So partnering together, working together, a conference that helps and facilitates that, whether or not the conference bureaucracy is at the heart of it. I mean, it's just connecting churches. And to me, those are the three big things that I've heard that resonate with me, and I'm interested to hear if they resonate with everyone else.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you've named it well. I don't think I need to add anything more. I think just from a theological or faith perspective, as I'm in conversation with both partners beyond the Rocky Mountain Conference and within the Rocky Mountain Conference, there is something so elemental about being in relationship with those who are different than us, who have different contexts than us, who see the world differently or experience the world differently, that there's something about our being in relationship with one another that helps us be faithful, helps us become a faithful person, that grows our faith in God or grows our experience of God when we are in these relationships across difference. And so I just, the intangibles, I guess, but there is great benefit in being in relationship with those who are in different settings than us. We can learn from them.
Yeah.
All right, moving to financials.
Okay. So so we're sending you this is the only real financial slide in this deck. We're sending you a PDF of our December 31 half-year results, starting with this overview, and then getting a little deeper, and then getting a little deeper, and then providing you a full balance sheet. So we can go as far as you want in these conversations. For this presentation, I just want to highlight and give everyone an overview of where we're coming from, which is we're coming from a few years that were really, really challenging. And you can see the red large numbers down at the bottom of the first two columns. We we set a budget in 24-25 before I joined the conference level. The budget was set at, and we finished our year last year, June 30, 2025, really having made an effort to reduce the potential deficit that was in that budget from 200 to 70,000. This year, we've got a budget as well that has a substantial deficit. The 40,000 red number you see up on the right-hand side is a half year unaudited, work in progress. But at a half year, we're at about half of that projected operating deficit. And then you see we have a positive income as of the first half year, all things considered. And that is as a result of a major gift from a church in Casper, Wyoming church that gave us a legacy gift as they chose to close down. So that's very bittersweet, but we're very lucky to have received that. So much effort on spending and paying attention to it and thinking very hard about it. We need to turn and think as well about building a bridge, not just on spending, but income to bridge our gap. We're a lot closer than we were a few years ago. And I want to turn now to thinking with you a bit about how we've done giving and where we are in giving. But first, we're starting from a relatively strong balance sheet. Our summary balance sheet is here. The full balance sheet is in the PDF we're circulating. We have over $2 million in current assets. Everything is liquid. It's predominantly invested with Cornerstone funds, some at United Church funds, and some in the bank. Um, we have no other assets that we might sell. On the prior slide, you saw that we had a very positive result last year as a result. That's a function of having sold our Denver office building. But our balance sheet is reasonably strong. That's challenging in the sense that ultimately these net assets belong to you, the members. And the question is, what's their best use? And um, I, as a treasurer, would love to see us move in a direction where we were operating in balance and not turning to this balance sheet to fund deficits, but maybe looking at what we might be doing with these assets in terms of the values that Aaron has put out before as our core missions. So with that, let's try to move to giving. So opportunities for stewardship, right? We have a leadership transition. That gives us an opportunity to restructure our leadership team and the associated costs. That has not been around for a while. That doesn't come very often. We should work together to come up with what is the very best, I think, for us. And I think that's an opportunity as well to recruit the best person we can find with the benefit of a sustainable plan. As I mentioned before, with our balance sheet, we could, with a balanced budget, hold the remainder as a source of income to support special missions. They might be in leadership, they might be missions about expanding church, they might be missions focused specifically on supporting churches within our conference that need it. All of these things are possible. And some of this has been done before. So I'm not speaking about, I'm not inventing something brand new here or pretending to. It's about building programs that we feel are sustainable that do these things. So as we continue to focus on aligning expenses and our core missions, we need to have great conversations across the conference about our giving. And if you go to the next slide, please, Aaron, we'll start on giving, right? So as I started at the beginning of this presentation, giving, as far as I'm concerned, stewardship and finance starts and ends with gratitude. We are grateful for what you do. That's the first and last point. To remind everyone, member giving basics. The conference asks all of us to give on a per capita basis, set at $15 per congregate member. 15% of that income is passed to Law for A, think primarily youth and other retreat leadership opportunities. Our church's wider mission, OCWM as we call it, is entirely discretionary. We all come to a view about what to give on our own. And that's what we in the finance committee and the board are beginning to think and have conversations about. And the third opportunity for giving is friends of the conference. 100% of that we keep. I failed to mention, if you didn't already notice, that 15% of our OCWM funding is passed on to national. That's separate from the bulk of the other special giving campaigns, the Christmas Fund, the Neighbors in Need, and those other things that many of you run giving programs for. All of those go direct to national, just pass straight through. So, how do we think about OCWM? How much should we give? What's right? These things can be quite sensitive, but what I want to say is that we need to recognize that every church is its own church on its own journey. And having said that, we can have, I think, an open conversation about where we all are in our own places. So next slide, please. Okay, here's the last 5 fiscal years ending June 2025, last June. And this is our church-wider mission plus per capita giving. And you can see we've got a trend down. And our fiscal year 2025 giving in these two categories was $90,000 less than in 2021, about $18,000 a year. So that's a challenge, right? And some of that might have to do with our engagement with you as from a conference level. Some of that might have to do with how things are in your churches. Um, Conversation is great about these things. Next slide, please. So here's a distribution. What we did is just to try to get a picture of how it all happens. How do we give? We took our 5-year totals ending June 2025 and just mapped the distribution by church across the conference. So none of the data I'm showing tonight has any of our current fiscal year giving in it, right? Which we've received through December 31. And many of you are giving, and that might shift some of what you see here. And many of you are changing the way you give, and we're grateful for that. But bear with us. This is just taking a look at what the 5-year average has been um, across the conference, and not surprisingly, the largest churches, for the most part, right, give the most. But it's not in all respects the largest. And there are variations among all the churches about how they approach OCWM, which makes sense because it's discretionary. You can see the top, sort of 7 churches, and then you go on to sort of 14. Those are, and then there's another break in the curve. And I want to talk about that in a moment. And then there's a large middle group from, say 14, 15 on down to 45, 50, somewhere in there. And then from 50 to 70, very, very modest giving, right? It's not an unusual curve for all of us, those of you who have worked in charitable giving. But it's a curve that provokes, some thinking and conversation. So let's go on. Thanks. Okay, here's the same idea. This is, however, broken out by those curved sections. So the blue this is over the 5 years, total giving. You see it's declining in total. And the blue are the first 7 churches, 10% of our membership. The red are the next 10% of our membership. The yellow are that's the mid-range of our support. That's about 55% of our churches, not congregates, churches. And then the green, very thin line, the green is another 25% of our churches, including about 5 who have closed in the last 5 years ending June 2025. And you see obviously decline, but we also see variations within the groups, and that's another cause for, in my mind, wanting to think about structuring conversations more often with you about stewardship and your connection and your engagement and how things are going for you overall. So, our leading 10% finished 2025 at $186,500. 5 years ago it was 252. So there are changes and variations at every level. And again, we're all on our own path. Next slide, please. I come away from this thinking and seeing a core culture of generosity. There is really sustained financial support for the conference. Seven churches, 10% of our members, seven churches provide over half of our giving by value. 14 churches, seven plus seven, provide three-quarters of our giving by value. 75% of our churches or 99% of our giving by financial value. And a quarter of our members are congregations in, substantial transition, development, becoming. And that is of interest, and I hope is of interest to the other 75% as we think about all of this. It turns out, I haven't put a big chart about it up, but our volunteer engagement on boards and committees is generally aligned with our financial support. So, folks who give are connected, have members. I think it's more challenging, has been perhaps for the nominating committee to engage volunteers from that 25%, although we have among our 47 volunteers, some very consistent and strong volunteer supporters, notwithstanding the fact that they may not be able to give us very many dollars. And that's terrific and meaningful. Obviously, I mentioned before, we have a significant dependency on our leading supporters. And that calls to my mind, it just emphasizes the need for regular contact, communication, connection, and conversation. And consensus is very, very important. And obviously, diversity and annual variability, these are all calls for conversation, for connection. But core culture of generosity. So thank you for all that you do. Next slide. Where am I going? Okay. Now I have actually provided for you here in this slide and the next three slides, a list of the leading supporters and the mid group and the lower 25 over the last 5 years. And I've done that for a couple of reasons. One is I think everyone's going to ask me. And so I want to I just want to be transparent about what it is. I also want you to be able to see that, it's not all the front range. They're leading supporters from every association, and that'll be true on every one of these charts. There are members in every association at every level, and at every point in their lives, right? Giving, I've provided giving ranges. I provided, what we have. I've taken the data we have and tried to calculate what giving ranges are per member. And they're very, very broad ranges, even, among our leading supporters. So these slides are intended to give you a snapshot of what we have found and what we have to work with. And in many respects, I view this as kind of a starting point for understanding everyone and trying to offer information that is helpful for you to think about where you want to be with a little bit more intention. Not to tell you what to do, by no means. My church is deep in the pack on the next slide. This is about what's right for us, and understanding, I think, for each of us, and understanding simply where you are is sometimes useful. Next slide. So there's a very broad range in the middle. Some of the people at the top of this list could be on the earlier list. The bottom of this list might be on another list. This is a little arbitrary, and it's by no means judgmental. I cannot say that enough. It's just trying to do some meaningful work to understand, how we all go about giving, particularly our church wider mission. Let's move on, Aaron. I think we can talk about anything in detail in our conversations. Um, this 25% just gives you a picture of folks who are, some brand new to the conference. They all have different stories. Um, and again, every association has members in all phases, in all stages of size, momentum, giving, perspective. So, and perhaps engagement with the conference, which is a really important reason for having these conversations. Next slide, please. So why just come to generosity again? The giving is substantial. Those who can lead are leading. Those who can give are giving. Those who are members in transition development are volunteering. All of these things are terrific. We have sustained financial support. We have sustained volunteer support. We do need to bridge a gap. We do need to think about what we can give. But there's a core culture here to witness and celebrate. So we've got two slides now, one about a financial conversation and one about our values conversation, which in terms of our financial conversation, I am going to send each of you uh, the data that we used in respect of your church to prepare and think about this analysis. It could be wrong. I have a lot of humility about it. It's been conscientiously prepared and kept, but the further back we go, the less certain I am. And so the first question I have for you is our financial data about your giving accurate? And some of you may just want to send me an email or send any of us, an email about some of these things. And I'm curious to know, uh, what other factors in your thinking about OCWM may be important to your church that we're not aware of. As we look ahead, um, think in terms of presenting a sustainable plan to solicit great candidates to take us forward in our next phase in the conference. What's financially reasonable for you to be doing for the conference for the rest of this year? How do you think about 26, 27, which we're about to start budgeting, and beyond? To go back again to the very first chart where I said, we're down 90,000, that's about 18,000 a year. Um, if if it shouldn't surprise you to hear that, from an expense perspective, because you all grapple with the same kinds of issues, from an expense perspective, I can easily see inflation in our overall expense package growing at 12,000 a year. So we've got to think about what we can do, and we need to be proactive about thinking about what a sustainable leadership structure will be, and 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 close the gap on those things and offer the next leadership team, a window, a runway, if you will, where they could move ahead for a few years without necessarily feeling a crunch. If you're able, are you able to move up to the relevant average on your slide? That's another question. I would caution you, however, that averages are just averages. Many of you are above the average. Obviously, I'm not suggesting move down, but and they may not be very meaningful because much of this data is calculated off of whatever membership data we have in-house. And not that data is not always delivered with a view to what you're doing financially. So if we all returned to our best level in recent years, we would obviously raise $90,000 more, maybe more. we would go a very, very long way to closing our gaps. But with all of these questions, what's right for your church will in the end be what's best for the conference. And I can't emphasize that and the word humility enough in terms of thinking about these things. I can talk to you about what our church is thinking about when we get together in person, um, if that's useful. Won't necessarily be applicable to all of you, but I
Yeah, and
think
I think just I would
help
just
me.
add, yeah, no, this is so great, Hunter. You've put such great thought into this, and I think part of the conversation is the word sustainable ministry. I think one of the challenges over the years in conference ministry, not just for our conference, though definitely our conference has experienced it, is leadership burnout. Pastors experience it, and so this idea of how do we carry out this ministry in a way that is sustainable, not only financially, but to the people, the staff who are called to carry this ministry out, right? Together, volunteers, staff, conference minister. Um, that I trust that somewhere in these conversation emerges a vision for staffing, and that we could financially support that that is less susceptible to the burnout that has existed in this position as I've known it and as previous conference ministers have known it. So that's part of
Mm,
the hope for the conversation for me.
thank you. How about getting back to where we started? Yeah, the conversation
Yeah,
about mission and values. You want to take it
sure.
as part of this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've loved in working with Hunter over the last year and a half is his coming in and seeing like, wow, the treasure of this conference is the ministries of our church and of our authorized ministers out in the world. That our leadership and our ministries are the treasure of this conference. And so we want to know where your ministry is thriving. We want to know what challenges you are facing. And we want to know what conference ministries would most help your church continue to be a life giving community of faith over the next 10 years, right? As Hunter has been saying, that there is value, we believe there is value in our being in relationship. And so we really want to give you some time ahead of our conversations to think about what are the ministries that would most help you, and are we on the right track so far, and what else would be, if we haven't named it, what else would be impactful for you in your ministry, for you to be able to carry out the ministry that God's placed among you in your faith community. And as we again look to this time of transition, we are looking to each of our churches, to our leaders, to help execute, right, not only the ongoing ministry of the conference, but in particular this upcoming transition. There are lots of ways that people across this conference can be part of this ministry as well as part of this transition. And so we encourage you to be in conversation with Kari Collins, who is the chair of our nominating committee, and we'll be having conversations with any and all who are interested in participating in the ministry of the conference in some way. And I love the suggestion that Hunter has raised of just thinking about appointing one or more member of each church to be the connector informally, just keeping track of what's happening at the RMC in the Rocky Mountain Conference and with your association, and sharing it back with your church, being a bit of a conduit of that relational connection. Anything more you want to add to that slide or to this piece, Hunter?
Just we can talk about it in our conversations, but I've grown enormously from the opportunity to volunteer
Mm.
at the conference level, and I just see it as a huge opportunity. And um, um, and it's an opportunity that should not be overused by any one person, right? So I love the idea of rotating, moving volunteers, and that is what is reasonable also for volunteers in terms of their own ability and their own lives and avoiding volunteer burnout. So somehow really stepping that up, I think, is across the conference. I mean, Kara is very, very keen on it and very open to conversations one-on-one with as many people who might be interested as we could think of. So,
Yes, definitely. Yep. Thank you. So final piece.
so I'll do the
Looking
first part.
forward. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So we have monthly board and finance committee meetings. I'll open any finance committee meeting to anyone who wants to attend. Um, and we have the most fun. But we have enjoyable, stimulating conversations, to my mind. The board meets monthly. They're available. February and April, nominations committee is recruiting. We've talked about Kari Collins and reaching out to her. Please do. Budget is beginning. We're thinking about what's our 26-27 budget. And we're having conversations with folks involved in utilizing our resources and spending them. And if there are particular issues that you care about, we'll find out who will help you get in touch with people who would be good for you to connect with. April, materials for our annual celebration need to be posted by May 11th because everyone needs to have 30 days to think about it. Annual celebration, please, Aaron.
June 11th to 13th in Provo, Utah. The theme for this year is Oasis in the Desert, a wellspring in the desert, recognizing that our churches are places of safety and refuge and resilience. And so how do we come together to support and strengthen one another so that we can go out and be well springs ourselves? So that's the focus of our annual meeting this year. Encourage you to pay attention to registration beginning in probably the end of February. And again, at that annual meeting, we'll be having opportunities for people to comment on the profile. We'll finalize the profile after we've received people's feedback. And then there will be the introduction of the search committee at this annual meeting. And then following the search committee will launch its official search. And hopefully in a year of June of 2027, at the annual celebration, which is at La Forêt, you will be able to be introduced to your new conference leadership.
One thing I just thought of that's not on this calendar is, but we can take up in our conversations is, are these the kind of conversations that would be useful to have? For example, again in September, again next February, fitting in with budget, your budget processes. By September, we know our annual results very, very well from June. We could do it in the summer, but people are busy. But are further conversations worth scheduling on a more regular basis, just by way of check-in? And the more we check in, the less necessary is it to provide a slide deck that is so long as this.
And with that, we are really grateful. If you made it all the way to the end of this slide, cheers for you. Thank you for sticking with it. Part of our hope was to be able to get a lot of this information out to you so that we can have a very generative conversation. We are very excited about being together at the beginning of February, first 2 weeks of February. If you haven't signed up, there is a link there. You can also find it in the Rocky Mountain Conference newsletter or online, or reach out to Allison at rmcucc.org. We are, again, from that place of a culture of generosity, so grateful for all you do in the world, all you do for the people at your church, and for the people in your community. We'll see you in February.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.